All right. Hello, and let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone who's joined us today. We're delighted you took time out of your day to share this Warwick's webinar for the release of this brand new book by Astrid Scholte, League of Liars. And if you haven't gotten your copy yet, when you went ahead and signed on for the webinar on that link, you can go to warwicks.com and do that. Don't do it right now, stay with us, but you can do it afterwards. And you can also just go to warwicks.com and put it in the search bar if for any reason that link doesn't pop up for you right away. And today we're so lucky to have Astrid herself here with us. There she is, Astrid Scholte in Melbourne right now, which is very exciting to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you
And
so much for
today,
having me.
good. And I understand it's very early there.
It is. It's just gone 7 a.m. So
Okay.
I'm hoping my brain's in gear, but I'm
Well,
excited.
we'll give you a second to wake up as we introduce. Also, we have Adalyn Grace here, and we're so glad that you've joined us to be in conversation with Astrid today. Thank you for joining us here from San Diego.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited and I can't wait to talk about this book. I feel like I've been talking to Astrid about it forever because I was talking to her as she was writing it. So it's nice that it's like finally out in the world and we get to talk about it.
Well, you're going to get a chance to talk to each other for a while. I'll just do a quick introduction and let everyone know too that they can join in the conversation with their questions in the chat. And at the end of your conversation, we'll pop in with some of those questions that I'm sure people are going to want to jump in with. Everyone probably already knows, but Astrid, I'm just going to give you a quick introduction here that you're in Melbourne. You were raised on a diet, it says in your bio, of Spielberg, Lucas, and Disney, and knew from a young age that you wanted to be surrounded by all things fantastical. She spent the last 14 years working in film, animation, and television as both an artist and a manager. And your career highlights include working on James Cameron's Avatar, Steven Spielberg's The Adventures of Tintin, and Disney's Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. She has a fiance and 2 cats. That's a nice number. Lilo and Mickey are her cats, and her debut young adult novel, Four Dead Queens, was an international bestseller and award winner. You can also get that at Warwick's. The Vanishing Deep is another standalone fantasy venture she's written, and today we're going to be talking about League of Liars with her, a dark and twisty mystery. So I'm excited to hear about that. Wave the book. So we're delighted to have you.
Thank
And
you.
then Adalyn, we are going to talk to you, have you do most of the heavy lifting today because you guys are good friends. And I'll just do a quick bio for you. You are the New York Times bestselling author of All the Stars and Teeth, which was called 2020's biggest YA fantasy by Entertainment Weekly. That's pretty cool. And prior to becoming an author, Adalyn spent 4 years working in live theater, acted as the managing editor of a nonprofit newspaper, and studied storytelling as an art form as an intern on Nickelodeon Animation's popular series, The Legend of Korra, which now I totally want to check out. She's a San Diego person, so we're delighted that you joined us on this sunny day to come inside for us. And you spend your non-writing days by watching too much anime and playing video games with her 2 dorky dogs. And what are the names of your dorky dogs?
Their names are Meadow and Muka.
Meadow and Muka. So we have Meadow and Muka and Lilo and Mickey. I love it. Well, you two enjoy your conversation and we will pop in at the end because I'm sure we'll have lots of questions.
Sounds perfect. Thank you so much.
Hello, Adalyn. How you doing?
I'm good. Hi, Astrid. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good. I'm so excited to get to talk to you. For anybody who doesn't know, Astrid and I met probably like 4 years ago, Astrid.
It might
3 or
even be
4, 5.
yeah, it might be longer than that, but yeah, it's been maybe
It's
4, at least 4, at least
at
4.
least 4. It's been a while. We used to share, our first agent was the same agent. So we met through that back in like 2015, 2016 or something. So it has been fantastic to get to watch her, publish her book. She is on book 3 now, which is super, super impressive. And I wanted to see, so, okay, how do you feel? It is launch week. People can get your book now. You've been working on this for what, 2 years now?
I think it's been 3.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Okay. So 3 years. How does it feel to finally have it like out in the world and people reading it and getting to like talk to readers and hear their responses?
It's the best. I mean, this is the most exciting part of being an author. I feel like you do all the hard yards, you revise, you write your first draft, which for me is always the hardest, and then you get to share it with the world. And while it's a daunting experience, it's certainly the most rewarding because you get to hear how people react to certain things, which characters they fall in love with, what their theories are. And yeah, so I'm super excited. I've been getting, lots of great feedback, which is awesome. And yeah, I love this moment of feeling like it's not just me and this book, it's now the readers discovering this book, and I get to connect with them that way. So yeah, it's awesome.
Good. And all like the jokes that you write 3 years ago, suddenly like somebody's laughing at them.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're like, oh, I was funny. I finally got the validation 3 years later that I am funny.
Yeah, it's a long haul, you plant these seeds and hope that they pay off in the end. But yeah, it's super rewarding to have it come out and yeah, just hear how people are enjoying it.
I agree. I think like talking to readers is easily the best part, the most exciting moment when they finally get to have it in their hands. You get to talk like theories, like you were saying, are so much fun. But I'm glad to hear from you that drafting was is not your favorite part, because it's also not my favorite part. And I just finished doing a draft of a book, and it's like it kicks your butt. It's really
Mhm.
taxing. So would you say like revisions your favorite?
Yeah, I find, so I'm a pantser. I write by the seat of my pants. I don't plot, I don't outline. And so that means it's quite a daunting experience. You've just got the blank page. Usually for me, I start with a concept or a hook, and I just sit down and I start writing, and I don't know where it's going to go, who the characters are, what's going to happen. And yeah, that's a scary experience, and it's tough. And then the revision part is fun. Like you get to flesh out the characters and the backstory and the world and make everything make sense and plot the little plot points through so that people can try and guess what's going on. And so yeah, that for me is the fun stuff. It's like the sprinkles on top and yeah, the really enjoyable bits. So
That is so interesting to me because I am a plotter and I want to know
right.
everything in advance. So, and that's why I like revisions, because I finally have it all on paper, like, okay, cool, now I can finally fix it so it fits my vision. But if you're
Mhm.
the opposite and like you're flying by the seat of your pants and you don't know what happens, like I would think that revisions would feel so much more taxing because it's like, oh, this is the story. And now I have to like polish it. But that's really
Right.
interesting to me that that's your favorite part rather than the drafting. And it just goes to show like everybody has such a different experience with writing a book.
100%. And there are so many different ways to write it. And I'm trying to be more of a planner because it is revisions are a more intensive process. Like I can write out a first draft pretty quickly because I'm not trying to make my vision work, as you were saying. Like that's, you've got a plan and kind of where you want to go and what the characters are doing. I just kind of let it happen. It almost feels organic in a way. But then when you go back and revise, you might not have all the pieces in the right position. You might not have the right characters. And yeah, that is a more intensive process. So I'm going to get better at that planning thing. I haven't gotten there yet.
Well, I mean, like I said, it just everyone's process is so different. So that's really interesting to me, but really funny also that we still have the same like favorite point in the process, even though our way of getting there is like complete opposite. So that's fascinating. Okay, so your third book now. How
Mhm.
was the process, since we're talking about process and everything, how is it different from writing your first book? Like, do you have a different routine, or is your routine like been the same since your first book, or how do you go about writing your books, and has it been different from book one to book three?
They've pretty much been the same for 1 to 3. I mentioned I'm trying to be different now. But yeah, 1 to 3 were very much like I had an idea for a concept. So for Four Dead Queens, it was the idea of having 4 queens ruling one nation and a murder mystery and then being, knocked out one by one. And The Vanishing Deep was the idea of, well, what if you could be revived from the dead for 24 hours? What would you do with that time? And what would that mean? And for League of Liars, it was a murder mystery set in a prison. And it was about, what if you could combine like a true crime documentary, which I love, like things like The Jinx and the staircase and making a murderer, but in a fantasy world. And you had like courtroom drama. So that was the initial idea that I knew I wanted to go with, but I didn't know anything else. So I just sat down and started writing. And that's pretty much how I've done all 3 books thus far. So.
Okay, so you come up with like the idea first rather than like characters or world. It's very much like the broad idea.
Yeah, that's right. So for like The Vanishing Deep, I didn't know what world it was going to be set in. And then I was trying to figure out, okay, well, what felt different and unique. And so I ended up coming up with this watery world. And for League of Liars, I knew I wanted magic because I've always loved stories with magic in it. And I've always written them up until Four Dead Queens. So Four Dead Queens and The Vanishing Deep don't have magic, although there are elements that kind of borderline with magic. And I knew I wanted to fully jump in with magic for this book because I love those stories so much. So I knew there had to be a magic in this world that was dangerous enough that they would arrest people for even attempting to use it, but also alluring, so alluring that people would continue to use it even though there was that threat of being imprisoned. So I knew the prison was going to be the main set piece in the book. There was going to be murder mysteries and crimes, but I didn't know who the characters were or what was going to happen.
That is so, okay, again, that's so interesting because it's like, again, everybody's process is so different. Like I usually come up with the characters first, then I have to build like the idea and the story around them. So it's just always fascinating to me to get to talk to other people who, you know, go about something so differently, but you end up with the same result in the end. Like you have a fully fleshed out book in the end, which is so cool. But okay, I want to hear you talk more about this beautiful book that, I have a glare. Okay, this beautiful book that came out on Tuesday, League of Liars. It's like this legal thriller, like courtroom drama, like jail breakout story. Is really cool. It's really unique, I feel like, to YA. It's a really interesting fantasy and a really interesting magic system that I haven't really seen in YA. So I feel like it's really unique. And I want you to just like tell everybody more about it and just get to talk about it for a little bit.
Okay, so I'm going to grab my copy back here so I can hold it up. So this idea originally started with a true crime idea, but in a fantasy world. And I was thinking about what would be the inspector from Four Dead Queens, what would be his next case? And that kind of led me on to thinking, okay, well, I love How to Get Away with Murder. It's one of my favorite TV shows. And I've always loved a courtroom drama. And I thought, okay, well, let's do a courtroom drama. So essentially it's about 17-year-old Kater Broderick, who is a 17-year-old legal apprentice. I don't know, I said his name age twice. I apologize, I have not had a coffee yet. And he wants to study to become a prosecutor. But before he does that, he gets this apprenticeship with the best defender in the land of Talene. And he assists on these 3 cases, thinking that he will very much want to condemn the criminals that have used Edom because his mother passed away from an Edom accident. So Edom is extra-dimensional magic and is magic that can be lured from any shadow to alter reality and time. And so he comes in with a very black and white perspective on the justice system. And then he meets these 3 teenage criminals and things aren't as black and white as he once thought. And he begins to question everything he knew about the legal system and where his loyalties lie. And there's not much more I can say without giving away spoilers. There's a lot of twists and turns. There's a lot of secrets and lies. And yeah, I like to keep the reader on their toes and surprise them. So yeah, I won't say too much more than that.
You really do. And I feel like all of your books are like that, like keeping people on their toes, keeping them guessing until like the very, very end. I think you're very skilled at that. And that is like a unique trait in your books. So readers, if you are looking for that, which I don't know why you wouldn't be, especially with a comp, like How to Get Away with Murder, like anything that comps anything Shonda Rhimes, I am here for. I am obsessed. I love it. Okay, so you have 4 point of view characters.
Yes.
And I feel like you kind of have a lot of point of view characters in all of your books too, which is also a very unique thing and a very rare skill to get to create as an author, because it's hard. It's really hard to create one character, let alone character arcs and motivations and backgrounds for 4 of them. So I want to know a little bit more about just your process in creating all these points of views. And do you think that you're always going to tell multi POV stories, or why is that so interesting to you that you continue to do it?
It's so interesting in the way that I never thought I would. Like the manuscripts I wrote before For Dead Queens and tried to get published with were always first person POV, and that was it.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, they were always just telling a very kind of intimate story from their perspective as they move through always like a fantasy world. And with For Dead Queens, I knew I wanted to have perspective of the queens so you could get their backstories. So that's why I did the multiple perspectives. And same with League of Liars. It's mainly Cater's story. It's his first person perspective from his chapters, but you do get third person perspective with the other criminals. And I wanted to do that so you're not just getting his point of view, you're also getting more of the mystery kind of layered in there through those characters. And I went through a few revisions, like working out who those characters were. I think the character that didn't change very much was Jay. And I do have...
For good reason.
This is Jay here. So he came through very clear with his voice and who he was and what he was hiding and everything. But the other characters, including Cater himself, went through rounds of revisions and changes as the story itself kind of came. I don't know. I guess I look at writing a story as it's kind of an instinctual gut thing where you feel, for me, it's like it's not quite baked yet, or it's not quite, things that are fluid and you're changing bits and pieces, and it's this gut feeling of, okay, yes, this is the right bit at the right time and this is the right character for this story. So I play around a lot in revisions doing that. And I knew I wanted to have kind of like the old Breakfast Club, the princess, the thief, the artist, the apprentice. So I wanted to have these like archetypes, but then also play off those, because you're going to have expectations of who those characters are and whether they really are who you think they are is part of the fun of reading and writing the book. So
I feel like if you're reading an Astrid Scholte book, nobody is ever who you think they are.
I don't want to give too much away, but yeah, that is part of the fun, is like playing with expectations. And I, as a reader, love to be surprised. So that's the thing that I most love to do with writing stories is keep the reader wanting to find out more and then being surprised when the reveal happens.
And I think you did a fantastic job with it. Can you tell us a little bit more about each of the characters?
Yes. Okay. So this is Cater here.
I love that you have art.
I don't know if you can see the original artworks behind me on my shelf there. So yeah, these were part of the pre-order campaign, and I do have sets to give away. So if you didn't pre-order, do check out my Instagram post about those. But yeah, Cater believes in right and wrong, right versus wrong, over anything else. He believes in the justice system. He lost his mother at a young age through an Edom accident. So that's really formed who he is and his passion for the law. So he wants to put those criminals away who have used magic so that he can protect society. He's very much looking at it from a point of view that he doesn't want anyone to suffer like he has suffered. So yeah, he goes through quite a journey, obviously being brought into the prison and meeting all these criminals. And the first criminal he meets is Jay. So Jay is the thief, and he's a charming, sarcastic, fun character to write and hopefully to read. And he has been arrested for murdering his father. So his father is very integral to the government, and he's part of this arm of the government that basically polices the use of magic. And so he's been arrested after being on the run from his father's murder. And then we have Princess Eleonora, and she is the princess of Talene, and her brother disappeared the king, and she's been arrested for his disappearance. So she is a mysterious character. She's longed to be free from the confines of the palace, and yeah, she will stop at nothing to make sure her brother is avenged, because she says she didn't kill him. So we'll find out if that's true. And then lastly, we have Letter, and she is the artist, and she sees the world around her and controls it with her art, and she's very headstrong and determined. And I was about to just give a spoiler away, I won't say that. And she wants to investigate Eden, which is this magic system, and she believes there's more to it than meets the eye. So that's each of the characters.
You have a favorite?
Letter was my favorite, mostly because I feel like I see the world in a similar way. Like, she has drawings in the novel, which are my drawings, my artwork. So she's kind of a little bit based on me, but she's much more brave than I. So there's
I have to show these off. So Astrid drew this, and it's in the book, which is amazing. And there's some really other super, super cool art. I know, Astrid, you didn't do all of it, right? You had some help.
That's right.
Okay, good.
I did do the prison schematic.
This one's so cool. It's a breakdown of the prison, and there's just so much art throughout, which is super fun. And I feel like we don't get to see that in books a lot. So I bookmarked them because I had to show them off.
Yeah,
it's my book.
Have more art in books in the future. That's definitely something I want to see.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm like so proud of it for you, where it's like I'm as proud as if this was my own book. I'm like, look at this drawing that Astrid has in her book. It's fantastic. It's super, super fun. My favorite character was Jay. I feel like
hearing that a lot. Yeah. Few fans of Jay out there.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people are going to absolutely love him. He's so much fun. So he's my favorite. And you've talked a little bit already about the magic system of this book, and it's really interesting and it's really unique. And I was wondering if you could tell us just a little bit more about how it works and also how you thought of it.
Right. Yeah, well, I always try and do something that does seem different. Like, it's difficult. There's a lot of fantasy magic systems out there, and I wanted to write something that felt fresh and different. And yeah, as I mentioned, I wanted it to be dangerous. So essentially, if there is a shadow, anyone can tap into the magic and basically command it to do their bidding. But the reaction of the magic is not always what they think it will be, and often can have disastrous consequences. So it is really dangerous, and therefore anyone who uses it or attempts to use it is imprisoned or punished or fined for it. And because it comes from shadows, I had to find out ways, well, how do you reduce shadows in a world like ours, where obviously shadows happen wherever there is light? So there's a lot of systems in place in this world to reduce the accessibility of this magic. And coming up with the magic, I knew I wanted to kind of play with reality and dimensions and time. And that was something that I had in mind, but I wasn't sure exactly the logic of the magic. And that came through with revisions of working out, okay, what can it do? What can't it do? And then making sure, you stick to your own logic so that it's believable, in the sense that obviously you've got to suspend your belief, but it's something that makes sense in the construct of the world and the logic that you give it. So yeah, it wasn't something that came together fully formed. It was definitely a process of like, okay, how could this magic be used? Where is it coming from? And so I had to think, again, I can't give too much away, but Eden does come from this tear in the veil between two worlds, and then working out, okay, well, where is it coming from, and what does it then mean that is on the other side? So I almost had to build two different worlds so that it made sense in the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny how things come together in revisions, isn't it?
Yeah, everything happens in revisions.
It really does. I feel like any author who is just like, oh, this came to me fully formed and I just put it on paper and look at me, they are lying to you. That is impossible. It's so Like revisions, I feel like are for whether you are a pantser or a plotter, like revision is actually where the story happens. Everything else is just like kind of a guessing game. And then you're like, oh, that's the book I was writing.
Right.
Interesting. Let me
I
go fix it.
I actually wrote like I think it was one of the last lines in The Vanishing Deep in my second draft. And I was like, that's it. That's the story. All right, now I have to go back and make it that story because
Mhm.
sometimes it is just working it out as you go along and figuring out the characters, and especially for me who don't have an idea or a roadmap, it does take a while to figure out exactly the story I'm trying to tell, the characters in it, and their role in it. So yeah, it's a fun process, but it's certainly a time-consuming one.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, even if you know allegedly the story though, or like what's going to happen, at least in my case, I'm like, oh, this character is going to do this and it's going to inspire this. And then when I get to that moment in the book and they make like a completely different decision, and I'm like, oh man, like
I
everything's
know
off the rails.
they do take on a life of their own. It's funny, like you hear people talk about characters as though they're real or like
Mhm.
voices in their head, but sometimes it really does kind of happen that way, where you do have a plan and you think you're working towards something, even if it's not a plan for the whole novel. Like you have a plan for a scene and then they just say something or do something and you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming. I
Yep.
surprised myself.
And then you're in trouble because everything you plan for after it suddenly doesn't work and you're like, oh, cool,
Right.
great. And in my case, because I do plot, that's how I sell books to my publisher now. So it's like I give them a synopsis. I'm like, here you go, this is the story, would you like to buy it? And then they buy it, and then I give them a book that's like completely
Completely.
different. I'm like, here you go, you already paid me. So that's
I'm
my
sure
process.
yeah, I'm sure they expect that. I mean, things writers do go off in different directions, and as long as like they're buying an Adalyn Grace book, that's what they're buying. They're buying your voice and
Oh,
your
that's what I'm gonna say from now on. That sounds so like official and fancy. Like, oh, this is an Adalyn Grace book. Would you like this? That's yeah, that's how I'm gonna phrase it now. Okay, so you mentioned earlier, and I'm jumping around a little bit, but you mentioned earlier, so you have the first person perspective, and then you also have the third person perspective, which
yes.
is incredibly interesting. And I feel like there are so few books that have that. Two questions here. One, was it hard to like stay on track? Did you find yourself kind of like as you were writing Jay's character, like going into first person a little bit? And then my second half of the question is, did you have any pushback at all? Because I feel like it's such a rare thing to see that
Right.
were you just given the creative control, or was that pushed back upon a little bit?
Yeah, I didn't get any pushback.
Wow,
So
that's
yeah,
awesome.
I just wrote it that way. And for like, did I slip into first person? Not really. Before I had ever written 40 Queens, which also had first and third, I'd never written third person before. So I always kind of, if I feel like this is the character story, I tend to lead into first person perspective, which is why Kata kind of came to me that way. And for the other characters, because they're hiding things, it's very difficult to hide things from the reader when it's in first person. So it made most sense that it came out in third person, because then you can just reveal certain things at certain times and you have more control over things, rather than, oh, well, the character just wasn't thinking this huge thing and therefore was keeping it secret. Like that's tricky to pull off. It's possible, but it is tricky. So yeah, third person definitely. I think maybe with Letter, I might have sometimes slipped into first, just because I felt like I knew her story so well, and I also felt like connected personally to her. But most of the time I was quite easily staying with first for Kata and third for the others.
Okay, that's really cool. I feel like your books are always so interesting. It's like a little bit sci-fi, a little bit fantasy. Things are done in slightly different ways than like the typical book that we see. And it's always so interesting to me just like to read that, because it's a mind that's so different from my own. And it's like, wow, how'd she do that? That's so cool.
Oh, my crazy mind. Yeah, it's I like to mash things up. I think that's one of the reasons I love YA so much. When I was a teen, YA wasn't really a thing. It was teen fiction, which was very different from the YA that we know and love today.
Right.
And I remember feeling like I'm a bit too old now to read teen fiction. I have to pick a category. Like I have to pick horror, I have to pick sci-fi or fantasy or romance or historical. And I'm like, but what if I want all of those things together? And that's what I love about YA is you can just be like, okay, well, I like this, I'm going to take that, I like this. And you kind of put it in a melting pot and create something that for me, I love and hope that readers will enjoy and it feels different. So it's great to hear that you say that. And that
Well, yes, you did it very successfully. Okay, I have another question about the prison in this world, which is so interesting, and it feels like it's its own character in a way. It's such this big prominent part of the story. Can you tell us a little bit more about how it works, or just how
Yeah.
you came up with it, or whatever you want to say about it?
Sure. So I knew I wanted this physically imposing structure, like something that kind of exists in the landscape to remind these people who live in Tulane that this is the consequence if you use this magic, which is very accessible. Even though there are certain things in place, like there's a cloud that kind of mutes shadows because it's permanently above the city, so it's always gray but not quite dark enough shadows to reach in and tap into Edom. And I wanted this structure to be something like I saw it very vividly in my mind because I'm quite a visual writer, and I saw it rising out of the ocean and this really imposing structure, and I wanted it to be right where this tear in the veil was, and this black crack in the sky. And I just had this vision in my mind. I'm like, okay, well, you've got a world where shadows are possibly everywhere. Like if you're going to imprison people and try and protect society from them using shadows, how do you then have no shadows in a prison? So usually prisons inside are very dark and dank. And I actually just recently went to the Melbourne jail here in Australia, and it's the old Melbourne jail. So this is from the 19th century, and it was so dark and narrow and claustrophobic, and it was really like it really moved me. It was quite a amazing experience. And then on the opposite, Vardian is this bright prison because they're trying to control shadows. So it has a very different feel, but in the same way, it is very much this cavernous cage of all these inmates who are, a lot of them saying they're innocent and that they shouldn't be in there. So yeah, I enjoyed like building what it looked like, and the elevator through the middle. Like I very much had a feel for what I wanted it to feel like, and wanted the reader to feel when they were reading about it. So yeah, it's
really cool.
Thanks.
Yes. And this is just like a random question, but something I just kind of realized is that I feel like water always sort of plays a picture in your books. And I'm really curious, like, is that intentional? Are you a big water person? Is it just something like you feel naturally drawn to, or what?
It's so funny you say that, because I realized that too, like totally unintentionally, that I had been doing that. And even this other book that I've been working on recently is the same. It's like on a coastal town, and I'm terrified of the ocean. So I think that's where it comes from. I feel like I'm drawn to it, and I think like most human beings are drawn to water. Like there is something so captivating about it, and being near a big body of water, but also the unknown of what's in there is something that there's so much you can pull out of for fiction. So I definitely tend to have large bodies of water in my books. And yeah, it wasn't something I realized I was doing, but I think I'm subconsciously writing my fears of my stories.
It really is so scary. Like, I don't know if you saw pictures of some of the creatures that washed up after the tsunami in Japan, like the deep
Oh,
water
no.
creatures. Oh my gosh. If you ever want to go in the ocean again, I do not recommend looking at them.
I mean, I'm
Um,
terrified to go in as it is, so maybe I should steer clear of that.
Yeah, I tried to get my scuba diving certification once, and like you have
Right.
to go under, and you go like 50 feet or whatever is like the max you're supposed to go. I think I went 30 and I started seeing like, okay, puffer fish seem cute. The idea of them seems fine. If you get
Mhm.
underwater and you see a giant floating fish with spikes coming at you, I was out. I was like, nope, no, I want to go back up. Let's go up. I did
That's a rough
last.
one.
Yeah, I lasted the day, but then I was like, I'm not getting the rest of the certification. I'm done.
Right.
I do not belong underwater. So it's scary. It's a scary thing.
It
Um, I wanted to ask you if you have one like publishing moment so far in your career that has just stood out to you as like the most magnificent moment thus far, because your career is just beginning.
is. Oh goodness. There have been quite a lot, but there's one that sticks in my mind because it was so early on. It was actually release day for Four Dead Queens, and I was in New York at the time
Mhm.
for launch. And on the day of, I was traveling with my family and fiance, and we went into Barnes and Noble on, I think it was Fifth Avenue, and my partner was filming me as I was trying to find my book on the shelves, and I was, it was supposed to be like this great Instagram moment, and I was like, there it is, and it wasn't there. So that was really quite funny. And then I went downstairs and I was like, I'm the author, and they're like, oh, it's on the bestseller list shelf. I'm like, but it just came out today. How can it be a bestseller? I was so excited. But the actual moment that was so meaningful to me was I was taking photos in front of it, and there was this girl, and she picked up the book and she came over to me and she's like, is this you? And I was like, yes. Like, I'm going to buy your book. It sounds amazing. And then she walked away. I think, did I sign it? I can't even remember. She walked away and I like burst into tears. I was
Oh,
like, oh my gosh, I saw someone buy my book on release day. I have a book out in the world. And yeah, that was for me such an amazing moment.
that's so sweet. I love that story. That's really funny that you walk in, you don't see it that moment that like you're expecting, but then it's on the bestseller shelf of like everything in the store. That's where it's at. That has to feel pretty special.
Yeah, that was incredible. But yeah, it's such a surreal feeling to, as I mentioned earlier, to go from like such a insular experience of you in this book and your editor writing it, and then someone's like, oh yeah, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to read this, and to wrap your head around it,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you haven't been published before. It's, yes, so surreal. And it's still surreal. I mean, I'm only 3 books in, and to think that people are reading my book, and yeah, it's wild in the best
Yeah.
way.
In the best way. Okay, I know we're going to dive into Q&A soon, so I want to ask you a couple speed round questions. For anybody who doesn't know, Astrid is a huge Disney lover.
Yeah.
So a couple of my questions are Disney based. Let me scroll down and look at them. Okay. You have to, first thing that comes to mind. There's
Oh
no
gosh,
thinking
I'm
about
stressed.
these. All right. Favorite Disney movie.
Tangled.
Okay. Favorite Disney villain.
Maleficent.
Ooh, okay. Favorite Disney song.
Oh, I can see the light. Now I see the light.
Okay,
Tangled.
okay, the one from Tangled.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, what about your favorite non-Disney animation movie?
Ooh, Enchanted.
Oh, okay, that's an interesting one because it's like back and forth. That one's
Yeah.
cool. Okay. Okay, your favorite food that you could eat for the rest of your life if you could only eat one thing for the rest of your life.
Disney food or just
No,
food?
actually,
I'm like,
both,
Dole Whip.
both answers.
I would say Dole Whip for Disney food, although I would not want to eat that for the rest of my life. That would not be healthy. And pasta, but it would have to be gluten-free pasta because I'm gluten-free.
Okay, well, what kind of pastas? Like red sauce, white sauce?
Oh, red.
Red sauce.
I'm like
Okay.
studying. Is this like an exam?
These are always my favorite questions to ask authors. It's so much fun. Okay, but I think we are at Q&A time. So if we want to dive into those.
Okay.
All right. I'm just dying over here. I feel like I'm getting to listen into that great conversation happening at the coffee shop next to you. And you're going like this. Like, keep drinking my
What
coffee.
is her favorite Disney movie?
I don't know. Wait, I didn't hear that.
Speak
That was
louder.
wonderful.
Someone told me I was wrong. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm going to get these wrong.
No, I really don't think there's a wrong answer on
There's
that.
not.
Although big Disney fans might actually disagree with me on that, but
Right.
well, we've gotten some great questions here that I'm sure that we want to make sure that we get to. Starting with, and this one was one that was coming to my mind right away, which was, are you planning any sequels to any of your books?
I knew
Inquiring minds want to know.
Yes. Okay. So if you did pre-order League of Liars, there was the pre-order campaign with Penguin Teen, which had the sequel sampler for Four Dead Queens. So I have been working on a sequel. Been working on it since the book, or even before it came out, like while I was waiting for publishing. So that is a dream of mine, to have a sequel for Four Dead Queens. And for League of Liars, it's definitely a world I want to return to. And I don't want to give too much away, but I certainly know what happens next. So just have to leave it at that.
Well, there was a follow-up to that, which is, will we be seeing more of Mackie and Carolee scenes in it? Specific question to those scenes. I don't know if that gives too much away.
There are some scenes with Kara in them.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That was intriguingly vague. I like that.
I like to be vague. I don't want to spoil too much.
All right. And then we had someone else, another person asked, how do you come up with all those twists and turns, which you have many, if you're not a planner when you write?
I think that's how I come up with them, because I go along and I surprise myself and I'm like, ooh, I like to do what's least expected. So if I know, okay, what is the reader going to probably think what happens next? I'll do the opposite. So I guess I could plan that, but I don't know what's going to happen. So it's hard to plan something when you don't know yet how you can get there. But yeah, usually that's the way that I look at it. It's like, okay, what will the reader expect to happen? Because either tropes or, other books that might have a similar plot or concept, and then go in the other direction.
I love that. And then go exactly the other way. Well, you already mentioned Shonda Rhimes earlier, so we had another question. It's actually for both of you, Adalyn and Astrid. What are the books, whether they're in the same genre you write in or a different one, that inspire you, that you've read? What other authors or books have been your?
Do you want to take it, Adalyn?
Sure. Okay, mine's kind of funny. Twilight, a long time ago, that is what got me into reading. And the reason, I guess this is some insight into my personality. I went to Stephanie Meyer's, one of her very first signings, because we grew up in the same city, or I grew up in the same city that, she was publishing and lived in. And people were like at war with each other for like Edward and Jacob and Emmett, and they were asking like all these questions about Carlisle. And I just remember standing in the audience as like, I don't know, I was like 12 or something, and I was like, wow, this lady is like, she's it. She is like, she's doing it. Everybody around here is like obsessed with this story. She is like inciting wars over here. I was like, I want to be like her. So I would say that series definitely really inspires me. It's certainly, an older one now, but I feel like just so eternally influential, and it really, kind of helped to establish YA as we know today. And I will just forever like go to the mat for that book.
Yeah, that was really a benchmark, wasn't it,
It
in
really
terms of
was.
publishing? Hmm.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything quite like it until that point. It changed the
Hmm.
field tremendously.
Yeah, it changed the genre, it changed the game, it changed how we use social media as authors, honestly. It was so influential. I feel like it even changed Comic-Con, which is
Oh,
such a random thing because she was the, as far as I believe, Twilight was one of the first movies to bring authors and to, or not authors, bring actors to Comic-Con. And now it
ah,
is so established and so normal. So
yeah.
it was really influential for a lot of things.
That's fascinating. I didn't
Now
know
it's such
that.
a driver of Comic-Con. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Hmm.
And it still has that
Astrid, have
longevity.
you been to, have you, yeah, I was going to say, have you been to Comic-Con here? Have you managed to make it to San Diego for the Comic-Con, which is a huge
I
event here?
have not, unfortunately. I've been to the one in New York,
Mhm.
but I have not been
Oh,
to the one in San Diego. The one in New York was so much fun. So overwhelming though. It's massive, but I loved it.
yeah.
I love that the passion of fans and fandoms because I'm the same. I'm,
Yeah.
as we were talking about, massive Disney fan, and yeah, I love all that stuff. So it's just such an exciting environment. But I think
Wow.
for me, for books, his Dark Materials was really pivotal for me as a teen. I was all about sci-fi. Sci-fi was my jam. Like I love science fiction novels, movies, TV shows. I watched anything that was sci-fi, and Animorphs was my favorite series as a kid. And that was the first time I read first person. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm
Mm.
one of them. Like I understand their story. And but then I read his Dark Materials and I was like, wow, fantasy is amazing. And that's really what put me on
Mm.
to wanting to write fantasy. And I still, sneak in my sci-fi vibes every now and then. But yeah, it definitely impacted my journey as an author.
Wow, that's so great. You picked that both of you picked those two very different, and I'd have to say from my generation authors. So I appreciate that. All right, we have another great question. How do you write characters with such distinct voices? Because they really do, especially when you have such a big cast that's featured in League of Liars, to keep all
Mm.
those voices. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it helps with third person. So
Mhm.
that's one of also the reasons that I write third person. I think it's difficult if everybody is first person to distinguish voices, unless you
Mhm.
have a very clear kind of way of thinking and speaking for the character. I mentioned earlier that Jay kind of came quite fully formed. His voice to me was very strong, and the others, they took a little bit of time to work out. But for me, building voices is about, okay, where has the character come from? What's their backstory? What do they want? And, what's their character journey? And that really helps inform me of their voice. And so for Letta, she's quite stubborn. She's wants to find out more about Edom. So the way that she thinks and feels is going to come across in those kind of very strong-willed ways. Whereas Jay's all about misdirection and everything's fine, and I'm going to be, sarcastic, and I'm going to make everything seem like, well, it's smoke and mirrors, right? So for
Right.
him, that was his voice. So yeah, just playing with what is it that is at the character's core, and what do they want, what are they hiding, and where are they going is how I work out their voices.
Mm.
I know, Adalyn, if you had
Well,
any input on that.
No, I
How
think
you
that
write
that
fantasy.
is, I think that that's, yeah, a great answer. I think you're right about third person being kind of an easier way to approach distinctive voices in, multi POV. None of my books yet are multi POV that are out. And that's all I'll say
Oh,
about that.
oh.
did you catch that? Well, then this is probably a good follow-up to that, which is, do you find that your characters shape the story more or that the plot shapes the characters? So which one of those do you think is the more driving influence then? The character shaping the plot or the plot shaping the characters? Someone wants to know.
That's a really great question. For me, I feel like it's definitely symbiotic. Like you shouldn't be able to pull the characters out of the plot and put them in a different world, a different story, because they wouldn't be the same characters. Because they should be informed by what's happening around them, what the world is like. And yeah, so for me, like I couldn't plop Cater in The Vanishing Deep. Like that just would not work. He would not be the same character. He would be a different character. So for me, they very much inform each other. There isn't one that's necessarily stronger than the other. Although that said, I do start with, I guess, plot in a sense, because I have the concept that I work with first, but definitely they grow and they develop together as I'm writing.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, too, for me, the character, it's interesting because every book kind of has a different approach. So for All the Stars and Teeth, Amore is very headstrong. And then, we go to the sequel and she's had a lot of stuff happen to her and she's dealing with PTSD. So like that's going to influence her, like how she views the world even. And then in Belladonna, my upcoming novel, it's like there's definitely some situations going on. And but Signa, the main character, has the ability to see spirits and to communicate with death. So again, yeah, you can't really, if you throw them into a different world, they're still going to be like the same character. The stuff around them is going to be different, but they're still, I guess, going to find like a story in it. So I like what you said, Astrid, they're kind of like growing together.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask both of you actually and it's interesting that you touched on this, Adalyn, when you talked about Stephanie Meyer's books, is that social media now, how that both of you are, you have these new books and, we're doing these webinars. How is social media affecting the way that you're thinking, even when you're writing the book? I mean, because you have those beautiful character cards, for example, Astrid, and you're able to put your art out in a very different way than people used to be able to, perhaps with a book. They couldn't share those visuals as easily. So how is that, those tools of social media affecting the way even maybe you're writing?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I certainly think maybe not so much in terms of social media, but when I'm writing, what is it that I could pull out of the story that might work as like a marketing thing, as in whether it's an image or an icon or a color or something. Like one silly thing is I like to dress up in things like that will match my book cover. So what dress could I buy? What jewelry could I buy?
Right. What skull could I wear today?
Yeah, I've got my little my skull friend Harold, I called him. So things that like that I think of in terms of, okay, what is it that's kind of, if you were, I guess, to have a merchandise store, what would it be that will pull out of that? Because for me, it's all part of building the experience. Like I love how immersive books can be, and storytelling. It kind of, it comes out of just being on the page. Like it becomes more of an experience, and social media taps into that. So you're sharing these things from behind the scenes when you're writing the book. You're helping like build excitement before it comes out, and being able to share like these icons and images is a part of that. So yeah, I think it also helps you feel connected with the reader, which I think as a teen, I didn't have that experience. There was no social media where I could have connected with my favorite authors. So it does build this idea of a book is more than just the story on the page. It is this bigger thing these days. Yeah.
Well, and I think we all have, I mean, it goes back to the desire, and I'm thinking of our love of Disney, of where, you want to dress up as Elsa or Anna, and you want to embody, you want to live in that world. And it's so nice to see the ability to do that in YA and other books where you can actually inhabit the world that the author has created. So your world building takes on all these layers, which is great. How about you, Adalyn? How does that affect your writing?
Yeah, I don't know if it necessarily affects, like, as I am putting my hands, to the page or to the typewriter, or not typewriter, my keyboard. I'm not that fancy.
Wow, you have a typewriter.
I wish, no. But it does influence, one, my writing time, because being an author these days is no longer you just get to write a book and then kind of be like, peace out. It's I'm like literally contractually obligated to be on social media. So it's like I have to be promoting myself, and that takes a whole lot of time. So it does take it detracts from time, but also I guess as I'm doing revisions or reading things back, thinking about what scenes would make great art, so I could show that on my social media and have, that as a gateway for people to kind of see the world, or what quotes can I pull to share with people that might make them interested. I do think it's really affected the way publishing promotes books. It's no longer really, people still do get to walk into a store and just browse and see a book, and that's still, a big way people get books. But also now there's this big push for social media and sharing the words, sharing the images, sharing, you want your book cover to be really pretty too, so it is more likely to be picked up by book bloggers and bookstagrammers, and you want it to be aesthetic. So, and does it match the rest of your books? Everything is very visual now. So there's a lot more thinking in that regard, like how to promote. I don't know that it's actually affected my writing, but it might have, it probably does influence what books publishers pick up. Is this one more aesthetic over here? Is this fitting the vibe of what like Book Talk currently likes? So I do think that it has a big influence in that regard.
Yeah, that could be its own challenge then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just going to hold this up because we had the next question. What's next for both of you? And I was going to hold up Belladonna.
Oh my goodness, you have it. Yes.
Yeah, so we would love to talk to you about that. That comes out in August, just a little for people that's going to be upcoming. But someone wants to know what's up for both of you, Astrid and Adalyn. What's the next thing on the horizon?
I only have secrets that I can't speak of.
I have secrets. I love that.
Some very exciting secrets. Yeah.
Okay.
She's like, and that's that for that.
And that is that. She's as twisty as her tails. We are not going to get any more out of her.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it is Belladonna is out next. It's August 23rd. It comes out. It is about... Amazing. Thank you. It's a gothic infused romantic murder mystery about a girl who can see spirits and who has to team up with both a very surly stable boy and Death himself in order to solve a murder before the murderer strikes again. It's kind of like Bridgerton meets Clue. So this murder mystery is happening in this big like gothic mansion, but it's Victorian inspired. There's like balls and ball gowns and very like masquerades, and it's very romantic and lush, and I love it so much, and I can't wait to share it.
I can see that Astrid is already is thinking about what she could dress up for your book. This is
oh yeah.
I think she needs to come to Comic-Con, don't you think so?
I think so too. I think that would be a lot of fun, although we'll be walking like this the whole time because you can't walk in Comic-Con. You kind of just like,
yeah, it's more of a shuffle. You shuffle.
It's a little shuffle.
Oh,
so maybe not a ball gown, Astrid, unless maybe that would work to our benefit and kind of like give us more space. Yeah. I'll wear one too. We could match.
There's a great comment in the thing which says, I'm already imagining the stable boy as Wesley from The Princess Bride.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
You've already got people's wheels spinning here.
I love that movie.
Well, I can't thank you guys both enough for coming today and coming together and sharing this with us. It's been a real treat listening to the two of you talk, because you clearly have a lot of things to share with each other, and thanks for letting us eavesdrop. I appreciate it. And again, we have League of Liars, so if you haven't already gotten your copy, please, everyone. Astrid, you have to hold yours up too.
Oh, I gotta put it down. I'm still holding it.
Okay, you hold the skull. Yeah, there we go. Da 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 da.
Great shot.
I love that. And And for anyone who wants, we have, this was recorded, and Amanda, the wonderful tech and marketing person at Warworks, is going to put that up on YouTube. So you'll be able to go back and listen if you happen to miss anything or just want to laugh again at the wonderful, wonderful comments. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. And maybe we'll see you again in August, perhaps, Adalyn, for your release.
Yeah,
That would
I'd
be
love it.
lovely. We'll get Astrid to interview you. How about that?
Oh, yeah.
We'll be back.
On the table.
Take two.
Well,
All
thank
right,
you for
so-
having us.
Oh,
this
you
was
guys.
so fun. Thanks, everyone.
Well, go out and have a wonderful day, and we'll sign off now and let you get your cup of coffee.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye,
All
everyone.
right, thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.